Today's topic, as I said, is the DDM web client. I'm using DDM, as always, to manage these workshops. So I use the tasks within DDM, within my project, to make sure I don't miss anything. The topics that we're going to cover today are the web client dashboard, settings, filters and profiles, searching and navigation, creating items and releasing, creating folders and workflow, creating actions, ERP interface, multi-factor authentication, supply chain folders and updates, and the comments functionality. Okay, so we're going to begin with the dashboard. Let me just say that we are in progress with this particular action, and I'm going to log out of the DDM web. If you don't know how to access the DDM web, if you go to Tools, Web Client, it will kick off the web client. If you don't currently have a license for the web client, one of the sales team should be able to arrange for you a temporary license if you want to have a play around with it for a month or two, etc. Okay, the web client can be configured as an internal address URL or an external address. Ask your IT people how to access that, either internally or externally. I'm going to log in as myself. Okay, Stuart McBurney. And this is the dashboard. So we've got the ability now to create folders, create items, recent list, category browser, favorites, subscriptions. So the things that you're typically used to seeing within the favorites of the Office client, favorites, recent items, category browser, etc. Okay, we've got folder information through the middle here, and we've got actions at the bottom. Not wanting to sell futures, but we are working in the background on the future capability of being able to configure these boxes. So if you want to be able to have your own things in these boxes, like saved searches, for example, or rearrange them, then in the future you will be able to do that as well. Yeah, this is basically the top level dashboard, and if you wander off to somewhere else, I'll just go through the category browser here. The logo at the top here, the graphic, takes you straight back to the top again. This graphic is modifiable. If I go to the DDM administration client, you can change the graphic if you're not aware of that, and you can also change I believe 2 of the colors on the gradient bars. If we go to System, Web Client, here we can specify the header color and the gradient colors, and we can also change the logo. The logo must be 162 pixels by 32 pixels, but you do have the ability to modify that. Okay, so that's how you change the logo. Let me say that's done. Okay, settings, filters and profiles. Let me just go into here. Okay, in progress. Settings, filters and profiles. Okay, so let's cover the settings first. If I go over to my name on the right hand side, I can go into my account details and reset my password as a user. And in the preferences, I've got settings, column chooser, and the ability to reset my user interface back to the default layout. So if I change the layout of my columns in the various windows, I can reset that. So let's look at the settings first. The first option we have is filters. So based on each different object type, I can choose what level of data I want to see. For example, for items, I can say I want to see all states, but if I didn't want to see archive or superseded as my default, then you can set that inside here. Or if I wanted to say for corrective actions, I only want to see active by default. So these are just filters on the data that you're seeing when you're doing your normal searching and navigation. Okay, so column chooser for each different display window, you can change the columns that you want to display. Now I'm going to show you that when we're in an area rather than doing that in here, but you basically say for parts, these are the attributes that I'm currently seeing on the screen. If I want to add a new one, I can do that, and I can move these columns up and down in this window. So I can choose the columns, the attributes I want to turn on and off, and I can set the order of those as well. Okay. The next option I have in here is clearly to reset the settings. Okay, so let me go into my recent list, and I've got my, in fact, apologies, I've overlooked something. Preferences settings. The other option is under the general tab, we can have a default language. We can also have, when clicking on an item preview, are we showing the PDF or the image? So if I'm looking at a drawing and if I click on the little preview, I want it to open the PDF. Now for each different screen size, and we've got here for a desktop size screen, a tablet size or a mobile size, you can change your default whether you want a list view or a card view for each different size, whether you're looking at items and folders, folders only, folder contents, etc. So have a play around with these areas. The other option I've got in here are my default download types. So there's not too much in settings, so have a look around and see how you get on with that. In terms of column choosing, let me just refer back to here. So settings and filters. So let's go in and have a look now if I do a search. So if I just did a search on all parts and I say bearing housing and I run a search, for my desktop display, I've chosen to have these data cards. So a data card view, a little bit like Amazon or eBay. You can toggle between the views. If I want it to be a list view, I can, like this. Okay. And in terms of the filters, at the moment you can see I can see superseded information. There's a filtering option up in the right hand corner here, the middle icon, and I can say only show me latest issue, and I don't want to see superseded or obsolete. That'll do. And if I apply my changes, applying the changes will only remember it for this session. If you save your changes, it will remember it as part of your settings. Okay, so filters. The next thing I want to have a look at is the column chooser. So in this display for parts, what I can do is I can go to the column chooser, and again I can choose which columns I want to show. So if I wanted to show let me think, created on, I can add it to my list, scroll down, and let's say I want it to appear after item number, and then I can save. So I should have my created on attribute here in the middle after item number, and that will remember against my profile. Okay, now settings, filters and profiles. For a particular profile, if you're not familiar with it, each user within DDM is a member of a default profile. Okay, when we deliver DDM out the box, it's called default profile, which determines your starting point as to whether you can see drawings, documents and parts. And when you create a new one, I've got mine set to beginning at issue 1. But the other thing you can do here is you can set so I've got a lot of users here because I've created a new group called restricted web users. And the reason for this is if I log into the web client as an administrator, log out, administrator. Okay, if I log in as the administrator, what I can do is, and I'll just use again the example of parts. If I search for, you know, M10 parts. Okay, In here, if I go to my column layout, I've got description, status, then item number. If I want to change this, I might want my item number at the beginning. Item number, so I'm going to go item, issue, description, status. Okay. If I save that now, what I can do as the administrator is I can go over to my login here, under my settings, and I can save this UI settings. So all of the settings now, based on my current login, can be saved against a profile. So if you want a particular layout in terms of the columns and within DDM Web, I can, for example, save these against a particular profile within the database. What I should have done is I should have gone in here and said, right, I want to load the settings for the restricted web users. Yes. So it should reset my layout, and then therefore when I then change it in here, or I believe you can just drag and drop things around as well, I should be able to say I've changed the layout and I want to save this against that profile, restricted web users, and there's an option here to say force all users to this new layout when they next log in. So you have the ability to say next time they log in, force it to change on their login. You are replacing existing template profile. Yes, I'm sure. So if somebody within that profile now logs in, the layout will be different. Okay. Have a play around with it. So, and there's no restriction on the number of profiles that you can create. That might be that different groups within the business are interested in different levels of information. So, complete. Searching and navigation. Very similar to the DDM Office client. So if you're familiar with the DDM Office, all of this should make sense to you. We've got a search bar at the top of the screen here. The ability to search everything, all items, all folders, specific item types, or specific folder types. I'm logged in as the administrator, so I've got relatively restricted access, so I shall log back in as myself. And therefore I have access to all areas, including all folder types and all tasks. So you can search, again, these are the areas of the database. We have the ability to use the category browser for searching, which you probably will be, you know, if I'm looking for manufactured, mechanical, bearing housings, standard bearing housings, and these are all my standard bearing housings. However, I've not applied my filter, so I don't want to see superseded, and I only want to see latest issue, and I don't want to see not recommended. I'll save my settings, and therefore it's filtered it down to only my latest issue released preferred items. Okay. I can go back up levels in the category browser, or I can go back up here and top here. Okay. So the category browser, which is accessible via the dashboard. I also have my recent list, as you would see it with inside the DDM Office client. There is also the ability to have advanced search. Before I show you the advanced search, let me go to favorites first, and then we'll do advanced. So all of your saved searches, as you save them within the Office client, will be available through the web client for you as well. So trying to think what I've got. Quality procedures, show me open change orders, and here are my open change orders, he says confidently. No. Let me just do that. So these are my open change orders within the system. Clearly, if I click on the folder, it will take me into the folder. So web technology dictates that we're clicking up and down levels. It's not a rich interface in the way that you're used to seeing it with inside the DDM Office client, but all of the information is exactly the same. Okay. So you can access all of your saved searches. Also any subscriptions. What I want to do now is jump to the advanced search in the top right hand corner. There's an icon, and this is where I can configure new advanced searches. So if you're not familiar with it, I'll just call up a saved search. I'm looking for all preferred fixings. So we can see here that I'm searching across the part class where the description contains M8 and the description contains bolt or washer or nut, and the preferred status is equal to yes, and then I can run my search. So these are all my preferred M8 fixings. So just an example of how you can build your own advanced searches. If I pop back into here, in here we can see recent searches. So if I was to call that back again, I could modify this, for example, and say, well, M10, and it will rerun it and go and find all my M10 parts. Okay. If I go back in and go back to here, I can also save advanced searches through the web client as well. So I could save this and just call it M10 fixings. I don't need to create a new folder. I'm just going to create it at the top level. It's now been added to my favorites. If I go back to my dashboard, go to my favorites, I have a new favorite called M10 fixings, and there they all are. So this advanced search can be used across any item type. Another example I've got in here is for example is, let me look, sales orders to be chased. So I want to search across customer projects where the status is equal to either inquiry or qualification, because that's what I'm tasked with chasing. And if I sort the column over here, I can see these are all at inquiry and these are all at qualification. If I want to look at a folder, I can click on the folder and it will take me into the folder itself. We see the folder attributes, and we also see the dividers below where all of the files and actions will be stored. Okay. So there's no simple search and there's no form search in the web client. We do have the free search, and we also have the advanced search. We do not currently have the advanced category dynamic filter search, the DF filter search, within the web client. Okay. Now on navigation, let's just go and find a part. If I look for my standard bearing housings again, these are my standard bearing housings. If I look at this particular part, then I'm seeing the part and I can see the structure, the children structure of this part. So the part is the parent of a drawing and a document. I could also do a where used on the part and see that this part is used on this assembly and is also available in all of these different folders on that drawing and in a task as well. If I look at the children again, also while I'm looking at the part, dependent on your configuration and your access controls, we can have access to the native CAD file and also any neutral files that have been generated by DDM. So if you're using this with suppliers, it might be that you only make the step files available because you don't want them to have your native CAD files. Okay, so if I go and look at the drawing, we saw a setting earlier so that if I click on this thumbnail preview, it will open the PDF of my drawing in its own window so we can view the automatically generated PDF. Okay, I'm looking at the drawing here. I can see the properties of the drawing, any custom attributes, old issues. That's a custom tab that I've added, and we can also see the audit trail of what's been happening with that drawing. Okay, because we're looking at the drawing, we're now seeing its relationship with the parent part. Okay, if I look at the part and do a where used again, I can open the assembly that it's linked to, and therefore I see the parent assembly and the structure below the assembly, which is a PCB generic assembly, the Loctite, the shaft, the bearing, the housing, and the related drawing. So all I'm doing is navigating up and down the child-parent relationships within the database. Okay, if I look at the Loctite has got documents related, which is the specification and the material safety data sheet. So they're just the child-parent relationships as you would see them inside DDM. So some basic searching and navigating around the system. If I do go to my recent list, so it might be that I want to choose some of the parts displayed. I can select either an individual part, and I could say I want to download one of the neutral or native files, or do a where used, look at the subscriptions. I could reserve the part or reference the part into folders as well. So we've started to introduce reserve and reference into the system as well. If I choose multiple items, then there's an action tab at the bottom, because I might want to download all of the neutral attachments at the same time, or reserve them all or reference them all at the same time. If you pick items of different types, it will limit the actions that you've got available. So if you've selected folders and parts, it's going to limit what you can do because you've selected two different types of object. Okay, so let's have a look back here. Searching and navigation. Creating items and releasing. On the dashboard now, we've got a create item option, and this is subject to your access controls. So I'm logged in as myself, and I've got access control that I can create parts, assemblies, drawings, and documents. So if I click on this icon, I can create a part, assembly, a drawing, or a document. Creating a document, it's been in the web client for a long time. It's really straightforward. You fill in the attributes, and then you can upload a physical file against that record. Okay, if I choose the option of creating a new part record, I get the screen where I can start to fill out my information. Let me just drag this down here. I want to choose a part number. I've got my system set for either automatic default numbering or manual numbers. I'm going to use automatic numbering. I begin life at issue 1, and this is my test part. I can fill in other attributes at the same time if I want. I want to reserve this part, and this dialog will show me the various folders that I've got. I've got filters inside here, whereas I can say not pinned by me, and then apply, and it will show me all of my folders in here. Okay, if I go back into filters, I only want things that are owned by me because I want to see my workbench. If I apply that, I want to reserve this new part onto my workbench. You could choose a folder, and you can drill down and choose a divider within the folder as well. So you're putting the new item in the specific area where it should be. Because we are reserving, you can only reserve to one area. You can't pick multiples. Okay, reserve. We can also assign category. In my database, it's a compulsory attribute, so I need to go in and choose this is a part, and I'm just going to add it to this category, which is a temporary one for creating information. I can fill out the other fields, etc., like this. There's also the properties tab and any custom attributes that you might have assigned as well. So I've now created the part, and I've added it to my workbench, and there is my part record. Because it's work in progress and it's reserved by me, I can click in and start editing, and I can accept or cancel my change. Okay. Obviously, if I go and look in the workbench, you will see this part in the workbench. What I can also do is I can change the status of a part subject to access controls. I could go in and say, okay, this part has now been checked, all okay, and I've now modified the status to checked and approved. And likewise, if I go to released, and I can release that item, and it will unreserve it at the same time, dependent on your configuration of DDM. So the ability to create items, what you can't do at the moment is you can't create a bill of materials inside the web. We will work on that in the future, but you can create an assembly, you can create a part, and you can create a drawing record, and you can create documents. If you create multiple parts and put CAD files in there, it will recognize them as a CAD file. But for you to have that CAD file as part of a parent CAD assembly, that work has to be done through the DDM Office client. You cannot create those CAD relationships through the web client, but it is useful if you want a supplier to be able to upload a model back to you. You can do that kind of thing. I can also, and I showed you the ability to reserve or reference. If I wanted to reference this part into multiple folders, if I say show me group owned folders, it might be that I want to reference this into multiple requirements, and because I'm referencing, it's a one-to-many relationship. Okay, so I'm going to clear that and come out of there. Now, let me have a look back. That is creating items and releasing. It is all subject to access controls, so it won't just work out of the box. You have to set the access control that that user, as a member of that group in that business unit, can create an item. Okay. One thing that isn't there today is the ability to up-issue an item. And we are working on it at the moment, aren't we, Mona? Yes. So, yes. So in the future, you will be able to pick on a document or a part or a drawing and say, I want to create a new issue of it, and then upload your modified file version against it. And that will all be subject to the rules within the up issue manager. The first step that we will take is only for documents. At this point in time, we need to think about it a bit more for us to open this up to parts assemblies and drawings, because there's a lot of implications of up issuing parts assemblies and drawings through the web client if you're not making the right considerations or you know, understanding the impact of what you're doing. So we're holding back a little bit. We will deliver up issuing for documents on the next public, if not the next public release, the one after that, because there will be a few over the next few months. But up issuing for documents is coming. Okay. Creating folders and workflow. Okay. I can create a folder. I've given myself access control for all of these folder types. So I could raise a change order and say, this is the change that I want, and this is the reason I want the change. I've got some additional attributes that I've applied here. In fact, if I don't fill those in and I just say create, it will create the folder. I've got it configured to automatically be entered into a workflow. There's no graphical display of the workflow in the web client, but this blue text tells me the step in the workflow that I'm currently at. If I want to send this, I'm currently at the step raise change order. If I want to send this for change request approval, I can choose the group that I'm sending it to, the user that I'm sending it to. It will automatically select them for notification or not. I can type in a comment and I can move forward in the workflow. So you can create folder types and you can transition through the workflow, clearly subject to ownership and access controls. I am the owner of this, so if I wanted to at this point say I want to set the start date for this and the due date, then I can start to update this information within the web environment. Okay. and it's a minor design change. Okay, and we need it as soon as possible because we've got assembly issues, for example. Okay, and clearly all of our subdividers, all of this works the same way as the DDM Office client. The use model is different. So if I go into Impact Assembly tasks, I've got an automatic task that's been generated by the workflow. I've also got an automatically referenced new template for the impact assessments. If you want to create a task within a divider, you have to go into the divider, and then the mini burger bar on the right hand side would allow me to create a new action. I want to create a task, and I'm just going to use a silly example, make coffee. Okay, obviously you would type intelligent things, and requires business unit. Okay, that probably should be defaulted, Mona, if we can have a look at that. And I say create, and we will now have our impact assessment and our make coffee task within the divider, within the folder. Okay. So creating folders, updating the attributes, transitioning through workflow. Okay. Complete. Creating actions. Well, I've just shown you creating action as a child of that change order. Okay, so if I go back to here, where are my change orders? Well, of course, I've got a favorite under my quality procedures to show me open change orders, and there's the one that I've created here. Clearly, I've typed in a load of rubbish in the top. So if I type in here, increase rad on housing 2037 to 25 millimeters. You know, you type something a little bit more sensible in there. So I've got my actions in here. I'm going to go back into my impact assessment actions, because the task that I've just created here, I can select it and I can assign it. So you'll be familiar with some of these functions here, because a lot of them are the same as you would have in the DDM Office client. So if I want to assign this task, I can choose the department. I want to assign this to purchasing, Paul Darton. Hey Paul, please can you do this for me? They will get notified via an email. So all I'm doing is creating actions in the same way that I would in the Office client. It's just a slightly different use model. But again, it's all subject to your access controls. If you can't do it in DDM Office, it won't let you do it inside DDM Web. Okay. So creating tasks. Likewise, if I go back to my dashboard, we have folders and actions section. If I look at my actions, all of my outstanding actions are listed in here. I can go to a particular action. If I want to, I can upload supporting documents, or I can reference existing information from DDM into the action as well. All of that should be familiar to you. Or I can change the status of the action and say, this action is now complete, all good to go, and I've updated the status of it to complete, and therefore if I look at my action list, I now only have 5 left. So most of what you need to do for doing folders and actions and workflow can be done in the web client. Okay, likewise with my folders, these are all my typical pinned folders, my folders, workbench, group owned folders, my decisions or my deputy decisions, pinned actions, my group actions, and my accountable actions. They are all options that you have in the DDM Office client. If I just open folders and actions here, these are all of these options that you have in this area. So should be all familiar to you, just laid out slightly differently on a dashboard. Okay. And I'm going to make this point again. In a future release, you will be able to have your favorites. So if I'm someone who's interested in my quality procedures, what you'll be able to do in the future is add your own blue box, call it quality procedures, and have those icons in this window. So you won't have to drill through your favorites in the future. And I'm really looking forward to that. What we're also going to try and build into it is the ability to have a query or a function behind the icon, so you could show KPIs inside the web as well. So if anybody wants to ask any questions at the end of this on that, I think that's a particularly exciting thing to be able to do. You know, how many open change orders, or how many non-release parts, or whatever it is you're looking at. Okay, so a proper dashboard at that point that's giving you live information. So, creating actions. Complete. ERP interface. For anybody who's been on some of the previous workshops, you'll be aware that if I look at my recent files, not sure what I've got in here. No, let me go to my category browser. Let me just minimize these. Okay. If I go to mechanical housing, standard housings. So this part, I've created a new tab in my properties here, which is a live link to my ERP system. So if I click here, this is the results of an SQL query on an external database. In this case, it's actually a business system. It's not an ERP, but hopefully you understand what I'm showing you here. Likewise, I've also got something set up that if I create a customer project, I've added some fields here for the customer address and contact details. And if I select this, I can filter through. And this query brought back nearly 22,000 results. And again, this is a query on an external database. When I select the company, it brings in additional information, and therefore we can pick on the user and looking specifically against that company as well. So 2 examples of linking it directly to other external databases, whether it's CRM, supply chain management, or ERP. Okay. So in the web client, if I go and create a folder and I want to create a customer project, it's exactly the same template. So when you build your templates inside the DDM for the Office client, what you see in the web client will be the same. Now, I don't have an example, but within DDM, you have the ability to display or not display these attributes on the template relative to the step in a workflow and a group that you are a member of. So if you want to be able to hide certain fields at certain points in a workflow, that is doable. Okay. This example, I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. I'm looking for a customer. It brings back 21,000 results, and I say, who shall I pick on? We got here, so I'm picking on you, or it brought in some of the address info. It's obviously for a particular location for and if I go into here, then all of the contacts will be in here as well. And what we should have in here is, let's pick on Tracy. You don't mind, do you, Tracy? Okay, so it brings in the information. So through the web client, getting information from external databases. I'm going to cancel this. The other example is, if I go back in now and do the same thing looking for a part, I'm looking for the same bearing housing. If I look at this bearing housing, my ERP link tab is available automatically in the web client. So through the web interface, I can run the same query and see the results from the ERP system in the web interface. So I think these things are really, really powerful. You know, if I was, for example, out and about on site, and I'm using the DDM web client, let me just do this. So if it looked like this, because it's on a mobile phone or cell phone, as the guys over the water call it, it will lay it out slightly differently. I can go through the category browser. I'm looking for the same item, bearing housing standard, looking for this one down here, and my tabs are available in here. There's my ERP live link, and I can see that, for example, I've got 20 in stock. So if nothing else, it's a way of using the DDM web client to be able to see information in the ERP system if you're out and about on a cell phone or on a tablet, etc., or latest price or availability or whatever. Okay, so the key is any tabs that you add, custom tabs, will be available in here. The other thing is, if you create an item and you change the status to released, my system's been configured so that when I release an item, it sends that information to a predefined location on the server so that the ERP system can pick it up and transfer it directly into ERP. So all of those same mechanisms apply. Okay. Now, so ERP interface, let me go back to my workshop list. This is my project, these are my actions, and ERP interface. Complete. In fact, I could do all of this through the web, but I'll be hopping around a little bit more. Now, supply chain folders and update. A lot of you will have seen this because it's part of one of my standard demos. I can create supplier folders. I've got a saved search here, so I've got a number of supplier folders that have been configured. A standard folder here for suppliers. If I open the folder in here, I've got the Team Members tab. Team Members tab allows you to add users as a team member of this folder, which means that this user can see this folder through the web client. So if this is a restricted web user, they can only see this if you've added them as a team member. Let me just quickly step back to my list of things here, because I'm pretty sure we had multi-factor authentication as one of the things to show you. We did. So I haven't shown you MFA multi-factor authentication. I jumped ahead, apologies. This is what we're going to look at next, multi-factor authentication. In the DDM administration tool under web client, multi-factor authentication, there's various options. They're all pretty self-explanatory. You can also change the text that a user gets sent via an email or the authenticator. So, and you can specify the grace period in minutes of how long that code that you send them is active for. So in my case, if you haven't actually logged in within 15 minutes of requesting the code, it will time out and you have to request a new code. So under System Web Client, that's where the multi-factor authentication settings are. If you now go to groups, against each group, I've got a group here called Web Only Suppliers. Okay, and against the first tab for that group, there's an option to say, do they require multi-factor authentication? Either no, via the Authenticator app, which is available on Apple and Android phones, or it can be via email. I tend to use it via email, and also you can specify the number of days that authentication lasts for. So if you want them to have to enter a 6-digit code every single time they log in, you can, or you can allow it to be valid for 1 day or 1 week or 1 month, whatever that option is. So it's all configurable. Okay, so I have a user called Sample Supplier. If I bring the web client back, I'm going to log out as myself, and this time I'm going to log in as Sample Supplier. Okay, just before I do, I'm going to go back to this web folder. Okay, I'm going to edit the folder, and I'm going to remove this supplier from access to this folder. Okay, let me go back to the web client. I'm going to log in. It's going to tell me that I need authentication. You need the code. I'm going to go to my email, and if we look at our sample supplier, hopefully we'll get a new email which will give us our 6-digit code. Okay, so 024545 024545, and it's logged me in. Okay, I have restricted icons on the screen here because as a restricted web user, I don't have access to all areas. The category browser is not visible. So it is a slightly restricted user account. Under this account, if I look at my folders, I can only see my personal workbench. Okay. Go back to the top. If I go back to my web folder now, I'm going to go back into edit mode, and I want to add sample supplier to this folder. If you either right click or double click on the supplier in this window, you'll be able to set the membership options. Are they allowed to upload files into this folder? If they upload files into the folder, who will get notified? The current owner or a specific user or group? Okay. You can also subscribe them here to say if anybody modifies an attribute on the folder, changes the status of the folder, adds and removes contents, or changes the ownership of the folder, you can be automatically notified of those changes. So I'm going to use the example of if anything gets added or removed from this folder, send the supplier an email to notify them. Okay, and I'm going to say okay. Now, before we go back to the web client, for this folder, I've got some dividers, and these are the files that are available to that supplier. There's two dividers, one for the housings and one for the shafts. Okay, and we've got a couple of tasks in there as well. So the one we're going to focus on is the housings, and here if we're looking at issue 73. Now before I do that, I've got access control that I can change the status forwards and backwards. So I'm just going to reserve this for modification. I'm going to quickly reserve it to my workbench because I'm going to force the status back to work in progress or to checked, whichever. So if I say this has been checked, approved but not released, the access controls for the supplier say that they cannot see things until they're released. If I go back to the web client now and look at my folders, I can now see my workbench and this supplier folder. Okay. If I go into the housings divider, I cannot see part 20377 because it isn't released. So I've created access controls to allow me to see that folder type. I've added the user as a team member, and I've set the access controls for items so they can only see, I think it's released and under review as a status. Okay, so therefore I'm just going to change the resolution of this slightly so we can see it all in one window. Let me move this up there as well. If I go back to here and I now change the status of this to released, the user will now see the 20377 file inside, and there they are, these bottom two items. I can now see those. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is show you that in this folder type, if you're not aware of it, there are what we call, there's folder attributes, which are the ones that we see on the form, but we also have folder content link attributes. The standards are link update, locked door reference, notes. I've added two here called work center and SKU code, part number. Okay, I've got link update and notes switched on. The link update attribute again is a relationship between the content of the folder and the folder itself. It's a little bit like a bill of material attribute. I've got my default set for this folder type to set to automatic by state. Okay, if I set this to automatic by issue, okay, for the part and the drawing, what would happen there is if I create a new issue of that part and its drawing, as soon as I create the new issue, it will substitute it in this folder automatically for me. So it's like a self-maintaining folder. the option that I think is probably the one that would be more commonly used. If you have it as manual, by the way, then to change the content of the folder, you have to manually do that. The one that I think would probably be most common in the supply chain is automatic by state. Okay, automatic by state. So if I go into the admin tool, I believe under my folder types, for supply chain folders, for link attributes, I've got the link update switched on, and this is where I've set my default automatic by state. When an item gets released, substitute it within the folder. So there's a few little pieces to this puzzle, but that's how the logic stacks up. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, we are going to do something pretty simple. I'm going to do this in a very, I'm not going to use CAD to make this change. If I go to this housing, okay, and let's just say, for example, latest issue only, go back to here, and what am I looking at? Bear with me, bear with me. Standard parts. This part and its drawing, I'm going to create a new issue of them. Normally you'd load it into CAD, modify it, save it away and create a new issue. I'm going to do this the short way, and I'm going to take both of these to issue 74. I'm just going to modify them as part of my workbench, not part of a change order. And I'm not going to put any details in. So all I'm doing here as an exercise is forcing this forward to the next release. Interesting. Why did that do that? Okay, so issue 74 for the part and the drawing, and it's gone back to work in progress as expected. If I now look in the web client and I refresh the web client, okay, if I go into my housings, this has been flagged as under review. So I'm allowing the supplier to see the released status and the under review status. A nice feature is if they look at the drawing while it's under review and they look at the PDF, it will warn them that it's not the latest issue. If they still view the drawing, your watermark can tell you that it's not the latest issue, it's under review, ask before using. And what also happens if I hop back into this folder, I want to look at issue, sorry, this one is under review. If I look at the audit trail of this drawing, the audit trail will show me that the supplier looked at the drawing at this date and time. So we know they looked at it when it was under review. So if they send something in that's wrong, it's their fault, not yours. Okay, so if I then modify my new issue 74 and I change the status, I'm going to bypass checked. I'm going to go straight to released, like that. Because I'm changing the status to released, the folder will automatically update itself because of this automatic by state to the latest issue 74. And if I go back into the folder and have a look under supply chain folder, looking at the bearings, I now see issue 74 of that file. So in terms of suppliers, customers, agents, you can restrict this down to a single folder and a single file at a particular status if you need to. So it's completely controllable. Okay, we're nearly there. I have got another example that I do. If we've got time, I'm going to go for it anyway. If I create a new supply chain folder, I've added an attribute here that says company. And I did this with and this was a requirement for you. I'm just going to call it test, okay, and say okay. You must select an owner. I've got a simple workflow here. It's an active, it's a permanent supplier, permanent shop floor, or remove team members. So I'm going to keep control of this as a member of engineering, like this, and this is now sitting in a workflow, and I want to make this a permanent supplier folder or a permanent shop floor folder. For a permanent supplier, I've added a condition here that says you have not filled in this company attribute. Okay, if I edit this now and I choose one of the supplier groups from within the database, I'm going to choose Tesla and then say OK. What that will now do is I've set some XML code up in the background. You'll see at the moment we have no team members. What happens is when I send this forward, I'm going to actually keep control of it myself like this. And what happens is it will read this attribute and it will add that user to the team members. So therefore, we're making sure that the right person gets given access to the folder, and the workflow is making sure the right person fills that information in. Okay. What I've also done is put some XML code on the final step of this, so that if I close the folder, like so, it will, if I do that, it's closed it. So if I just clear the screen, search again, the last one in here is probably called something silly because I just gave it a silly number. Test. What will have happened is it's automatically removed the team member. So if you close the folder, do not let anybody access it through the web again. Just closing that administration loop down. Okay. Let's go back to workshops. It's a big topic, sorry. Web client, actions. We've seen multi-factor authentication. We've completed that. We've also seen supply chain folders, and we're now going to look at comments. It's a very simple one, so I'm just going to set that to complete. If I go to the web client as a supplier, if I'm looking at a drawing and I find a problem, I can go into comments and I can type in a comment and I can say I'm sending this comment to John Herstick, la-di-da-di-da, and I can also copy and tag other people while I'm doing that, like that, and send a comment. So we can send comments in the web client against any object type, parts, assemblies, drawings, documents, folders, and tasks. If I go back to here and that's been empty because that's not the one I'm looking for, supply chain folders. If I look in my sample supplier folder like this, if I go to the housings and look at the drawing, if I open the properties, then there is the comment that came from that particular person. I can go in and I can reply to the comment like so. It will automatically send it to the person that sent the original comment, and therefore if I go back into the web client, if I close it, this 1 at the top will probably change to 2 within a minute if it's not already my comment. It's the comment that I added in here because we're looking at the right drawing. I can either respond to the message here like this, or if I click on the icon, it will take me to that item within the database and open the comments so that I can reply to it in here as well. So the ability to add your notes and comments within the web client that are also visible through the Office client. Okay, quick summary of what we've looked at, because there was quite a lot to cover. Apologies for that. Okay. So, oops. Workshop, active workshop. We covered the dashboard, settings, filters and profiles, searching and navigation, creating items and releasing, creating folders and workflow, creating actions, ERP interface, multi-factor authentication, supply chain folders with automatic update capability, and the comments and messages.